Hello and welcome to a magnificent moment in the Forest All Over podcast era. We have just trashed Man United at their theatre of nightmares. It has been wonderful. I have Ross all the way from Austin, Texas, who was at the game behind enemy lines, and Richard all the way from Oklahoma, who does the Talking Reds podcast. But I've wanted Richard on a long time before he even did that because he is a Forest All Over the World fan. We're going to get into what was one of the most magnificent away days, but there's been so many lately, it's hard to keep count. Let's get into it. Ross, how are you doing? All the way from Austin, Texas. You were at the Man United game. Do you want to maybe give a bit of a breakdown of how you were feeling? I know you were behind enemy lines, but you had to sit in the home end. Tell me how it all went down.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. Nice to be back on again. Third time with you guys, and maybe I get a hat-trick ball or something for this one. But yeah, it was a really exciting week for me because I had the good fortune of coming into town unexpectedly for work, and I had the pleasure of seeing you at the Ipswich game and then into Manchester as well for the following weekend. And yeah, it was obviously what we all dream of, right? Going away to the quote-unquote big teams and holding our own. And it was not the first time this season that's happened, and I went in with fear. I felt like I anticipated the Forest were going to be defeated. I felt like the Amorim era was going to turn fortunes for United, and on paper I think they had to win 1-0 to jump above us in the league, and it became a 6-pointer by virtue of the fact that we won and jumped way above them. So well, with the early goal and everything else, it was definitely one to go down and lasting in the memories. And while the weather was pretty filthy, it allowed for a great response in the end. And yeah, great away day for Forest, great for all of us Forest fans, wherever you are around the world. And I was very fortunate to be at the Theatre of Nightmares, as you say.
Yeah, I suppose the thing I want to touch on most is, you're sat there watching those away fans go absolutely mad. I didn't think we were going to get another 3 goals at Old Trafford. We got 3, or no, we got 2 last year. I didn't think we were going to get another 2 goals, let alone 3. And this time we broke the 3-2 curse. Away fans, what were they like? I mean, you must have been sat there on your hands, as you said before you jumped on the podcast. Like, what was it like? It must have been just like, I wouldn't have been able to contain myself sitting in the home end. I'd have been like, come on! It must have been unbearable, but amazing at the same time.
It was. So yeah, certainly sat on my hands. Watching, I mean, full credit to the Forest fans at the other end. So they went absolutely bonkers, and understandably so. But I've been, we've spoken before about various away days I've been on back in my past when I lived in England, and the Forest fans on the road are incredible. I know it firsthand, been there firsthand, love it. No better sensation. And the roar that came from the opposite end and the stunned silence that came out of basically 3/4 of Manchester was palpable. And it was, I think the most alarming part was because having seen United lose to corners against Arsenal, of all the things you thought they were going to do well in the first 2 minutes, is win the near post header on a corner. And when Milenkovic just leapt up and bulleted it pretty much in my general direction, as I say, I was like very stoic in how to respond. But what a moment. And, that was the start of obviously good things.
Amazing. Richard, I'll bring you in now. Where were you watching the game? You were in Oklahoma, obviously. I mean, what was the situation there? What was the time zone at the time? Were you 5 hours behind? So you're about 12 o'clock in the day? Was it something like that?
Yeah, it started 11:30 a.m., so we're 6 hours behind. Yeah, so I was watching it on Peacock, as we tend to do right in the U.S., Russ. And yeah, I was messaging back and forth. I really try not to gloat too much when we have progress as a club, especially at the hands of Manchester United, because I have a brother who is an effusive, massive, rabid Manchester United fan, but I can't help it. I mean, I was just giving him so much stick. That first goal, I mean, I think I put 6'5" Serb at your near post in the WhatsApp group, and he just gave me the swearing red-faced or orange-faced emoji in response. So it was fantastic. I mean, yeah, Chris, I know how excited you were being at the Manchester United match that we played against them at home last year, and just the elation you had. I remember the video I think you did for Red Side of the Trent, maybe, or
It was for misrolling in. Yeah.
And I felt the same way, but in my living room. So I was just absolutely going mental at the first half for very different reasons, second half for a much better reason. So yeah, I enjoyed every second. My son came in and enjoyed it with me, and a lot of high-fiving, a lot of, bro hugging, if you will. So it was great. It was brilliant.
That's very sweet. I love that it's a family affair as well. I think
Oh, yeah.
For most of us, and I think that Ross and Richard, both of you will probably speak to this. Look, we've come from a generation that watched Man United at Old Trafford basically never lose, win huge matches, play in huge games. The times that I remember them losing at Old Trafford were, Real Madrid in the early sort of 2000s when Ronaldo scored against them a hat-trick, stuff like that. Other than that, they would basically always win. That's obviously changed over the course of the last 10 years, particularly this season has changed. But for us, I think for me, your generation, and even my cousin, he's early 20s, who I brought to the other Man United game at home a year ago that we won. It's that kind of vibe of like, you cannot quite believe what you're seeing. And that's why it took 30 years, because from sort of 1994 onwards, United were absolutely superb and were winning everything. So for us to just sit there and realize, wait a second, like there's a moment in the game where I was in Paris in a hotel room, sat with my laptop. I was able to come back. My missus allowed me to come back to watch the game with her. And I was just going, is this going to happen? And she couldn't quite believe it either, because she heard me talk about it so much. But yeah, Richard, speak to that a bit, the generational pull of sort of Old Trafford and Manchester United, and ever thinking that this could ever happen.
100%. Yeah, because when I was younger, especially when I lived in the UK at the time, we had a great club ourselves. I mean, it was like in the midst of still that Clough era for Forest, along with Stuart Pearce, Des Walker. I was there for the first match that Roy Keane played. So that was that kind of period of time when we were a great club. But Manchester United were on a whole nother stratosphere, right? I mean, they got Ryan Giggs coming up. I even remember the Lee Sharp period. I don't know if you remember Lee Sharp.
I remember the Lee Sharp period. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I remember like he just exploded on the scene and was incredible. Obviously then Keane transitioned over there, which was disappointing, but not totally shocking. Mark Hughes. I mean, they were just this machine of a club. And then you shift into that Beckham, Paul Scholes, that era of team, Ferdinand and so forth. And it just got even more the case. And so, yeah, it's incredible, like the sort of dragon slaying moments that we're doing this season. When you look at what we did with Liverpool, I mean, talking about 55 years of, futility at Anfield. And then you now pivot to 30 years of futility, which granted, you had 20 some odd years in either League One or Championship, but 30 years nonetheless, decades of time where we didn't beat them. And so for me personally, as you've stated, Chris, just knowing what I've seen and watching a lot of matches with Manchester United playing, even though we weren't playing them at times, just out of sheer interest about the kind of quality and the kind of, with Sir Alex Ferguson involved and just the kind of manager he was. I mean, he was the best manager on the planet at the time. And so, and I'm sure it continues to be a sore spot for them to this day. But that aside, yeah, it's just incredible to see the juxtaposition of that and know that we're starting to sort of inch and get closer back to what we were than I think they are, which is remarkable.
And at a remarkable rate as well. Like, I mean,
yeah.
We keep every podcast, including yours, Talking Reds podcast, and all the other podcasts out there that
sorry
that
for the shameless plug behind me.
No, listen,
I should turn that around.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, but like every podcast that's out there talking about Forest that I've heard this season, every single one, that conversation comes up again and again. What is our ceiling this season? What is our ceiling this season? And I know we had a reasonably good start last season, actually. I remember we beat Chelsea away and we were looking a little bit better and we were like, oh, maybe we can start to look into the mid-tables. And then obviously we drifted down and the PSR stuff happened. But this season, it's been, what is our ceiling? What is our ceiling? And then we lost to Fulham, then we came back and bounced back a little bit and did well away at Chelsea. I was at that game, unbelievable away day again. But like, what is our ceiling? Ross, what is our ceiling this year? What are we looking at? We're in fifth. It's December. We're in fifth. Yeah. This is not a joke. We're not going away. We're beating Liverpool and Man United at Old Trafford and Anfield. We're taking a draw against Chelsea, who are now in a title race, by the way. Mm-hmm. So where are we going? Ross?
So Chris, I have to commend your positivity on this one, because I've got a confession to make. In the car back home from Manchester, I was looking at how many points above relegation we were first.
Well, that's the Forest way. I mean,
It's the
I
Forest
don't
way.
blame you. I don't blame you for doing that. But yeah, go on.
And Richard, you and I must be kindred spirits, because I shared the car drive home with my brother, who's a United fan, and part of the conversation with him was like, we've got 25 points, even when Hull demised that season. If you look, I think two or three teams at the bottom may not get 25 points this season. So I'm almost at this point of, just reassure me first that we're going to be in this league next season. That is some negative core belief of all these years of pain and road trips to Warsaw and Yeovil and everything else. So I'm very much in that. Anything else is a bonus. But just looking at the maths of it, really, we've got to be looking in that sort of 55 points plus range. And we are very much what Bournemouth, Fulham, Brentford are. And it's so close in amongst those teams. So if we finish 7th or 13th, it's going to kind of be a bit of a coin toss, I think, with some of those teams. But ultimately, if we can add 20 points on last season, that's like massive progress. So for me, my kind of baseline is, how many points more are we better off than last year, and let the league position take care of itself kind of off the back of that. So we'll see. And then I have other conversations with people where I'm like, this is going to be Leicester 2014 all over again, but I don't really mean that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you should beat it, because you know what? I think, look, I've been in the same boat that everyone else has been in. Kind of, look, I kind of still believe 14th is a good season, and that's fine. But I think the thing that kind of got me recently was we jumped into 3rd at one point, and I recall thinking, oh, okay, this is crazy. And then, obviously we slipped down again, and then we came back up again. And I think for me, it was after that run of games, Palace, Leicester, and then West Ham, and then we lost to Newcastle and Arsenal. But then when we beat Ipswich at home, we were at that game, Ross. It was pretty clinical. And I was like, okay, we're winning the games we're meant to now and keeping clean sheets. And now we've come out the back of 2 Manchester away days, and we've won one of those games, taking 3 points. It just means that we're coming through the toughest games. Richard, we've played Chelsea away, Brighton away, Arsenal away, City away, Liverpool away, Man United away.
Man City,
and yes. We're in 5th, guys. Like, we're in 5th. So they're tough away games. They're done for the season, not even halfway through. What are your expectations, Richard, now?
Well, it's mind-blowing to me, to your point about points, Ross. Like, if you look at where we're at, and I think I maybe threw this out there in one of our episodes, we're 70% of the way there to our points accumulated last season. And we're only 15 weeks in. I mean, this is just mind-blowing. I've been trying to be very measured, kind of like Ross, trying to be very cautiously optimistic about where we're headed, because we're in that European sort of space now. And so I know Dan Cook, Danscape who comes on our podcast a lot, he's got this European dream tracker, and we're continuing to stay above that line that's required, to Ross's point, that 55 points. And if you look at the projected points for the rest of the season, that's exactly where we are, which is so great call out on that, Ross. But for me, I'm still kind of saying somewhere in that, above that 14th, 13th position, to me would be a huge change for us, a huge shift forward, not only in terms of the points accumulation, where we reside in the table, what we've done during the course of the season, as you just pointed out, Chris, coupled with the kinds of development and progress we've seen in some of the players. So that's added to that. So we predicted 12th, I think, on our podcast. So I think if we hit somewhere around there, we've made huge strides, because as Ross pointed out, your mind just by default, right? Just from, I hate to use the word trauma, because there's more traumatic things in the world than what we're talking about. But that trauma of just knowing, oh my gosh, it's a fight, it's a dog fight at that end of the table. And we're just not there. And I just don't think we'll be there. I think we're too composed of a team. So from a ceiling standpoint, I'm saying we're in Europe for sure, right? Whatever that looks like. But from a floor standpoint, I think it's in that 12 to 14 range. And I'd be shocked if it's closer to 14, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree at the rate we're going. And I think the thing for me is, like, we kind of, we were meant to hit our slump around after that Newcastle and Arsenal game, and it just didn't happen. Everyone expected us to to struggle against Ipswich. And I know that wasn't the prettiest game, but I still felt like those kind of games, when you come through them with just a penalty win and you drag it out, and like I said in the last podcast, they have a late corner and it's a bit nervy, but you stand tall and you get the job done. I think they were coming off the back of a win against Spurs away and a draw with Man United at home. So Ipswich really could have dug in and given us problems, and they just didn't. And I think, I don't know, I look at this now, we're coming into January, we need to strengthen some positions. Are we gonna go for it in January, knowing where we are? Are we gonna try and aim for that European spot, Richard? Like, is that what we're doing now? Is it like, okay, we're gonna get a striker in and back up Wood? We probably do need a backup just in case something happens. And I do think Taiwo's still a good backup, by the way. I don't care if he's coming on and not scoring goals. I think he's still a very good backup, but I think we do need something else, a bit more firepower, just in case, during that lull period when Callum Hudson-Odoi and Morgan Gibbs-White aren't quite firing, or even Alanga. So we do need a bit of firepower, but by God, like, you'd almost say, don't ruin it as well at the same time. Like, don't bring in too many players,
100%. Yeah, it's interesting. I've kind of shifted from, okay, we got to get a true number 9, right? Maybe someone with a little bit more athleticism. Not that, he's totally stoic, Chris Wood is, but by any means. But you look at the differences between him and Taiwo, right? I mean, Taiwo is kind of a physical specimen, right? He's just a very different type of player. But he's got properties that are similar to Wood in terms of his finishing in and around goal. He's great at sort of his back to goal and being able to turn somebody, things like that. The guy I absolutely love, and I know he's been brought up before, it's not a shock, because he's been a player that has been on people's radar, including Arsenal, including Manchester United, is Brian Brobby. And the reason I like him is because that's the kind of guy I want to see, because there's some positional versatility. And if there's one thing we've seen in the way that we've recruited, it's guys who can play in multiple areas. I mean, look at Elian Anderson, look at Jota. Those guys can, even Morgan to a degree, they can kind of shift around. Nico Dominguez. There's the guys that can kind of play multiple positions if needed, and they can play them at a really, really high level. Having a guy like that who, he's not a tall player. I mean, he's 5'10", 5'11" in that range, but he's got physicality to him. He's pretty decently built. He's got some good pace. He passes the ball really well in tight spaces. He's the kind of guy that you might be able to say, hey, if we just see a continuation, Alanga seemed to play better the other day, when he came in against Ipswich, but at the same time, he's been really inconsistent. Callum's had, in and out in terms of dips of form. If you get a guy like that and who can fill in as needed as a 9, different type of 9, but he can also play the wing, and he's a goal scorer as well. I mean, I think he was the second leading goal scorer in the Eredivisie or whatever, I think maybe right behind Jimenez. So that kind of player to me would be a great thing to throw money at, because he's only 22 years old as well. So there's a lot to come from him, and he's going to take time to get acclimated to the Premier League. As we know, there's not going to be this Murillo type thing with all these guys we bring in, right, where they just seem to hit the ground running. But he's the kind of guy I think we could utilize. And then you don't want to see Taiwo go away per se, but you just need more contribution from a goal standpoint. We got it against Manchester United amazingly, but there's been such that reliance on Chris Wood for so long. So we need a guy like that to come in, from my mind, who can kind of play a couple of different positions and provide you a totally different dynamic as needed. Because there may be matches where you say, we need to rest Wood because he's getting older, and then we need to bring in someone who's a little bit more dynamic in that way.
100%. And I think that's a very good shout, actually. I also think that, while we want to rely on Wood and Milankovic, we should still be wary that once they get taken out of the team, what is going to happen? We've seen our midfield sort of manage really well without Danilo and Sangare. We've seen Dominguez fill in well. We've seen Yates step up to the plate and be brilliant. So we've seen our midfield manage pretty well. When they come back, that'll help even more. But my worry would be, it would Morato come in and then him and Murillo play if something happened to Milankovic, or vice versa if something happened to Murillo, etc. I think Oman Bamadeli is a good student as well as a number. He's probably 4th, 5th choice backup, and he did reasonably well last year. Not just saying that because he's Irish. I actually thought he was decent, but we are yet to see us without that. So we're kind of yet to see us without Wood this season as well. So I think a striker is definitely somewhere we should strengthen. Ross, what about you? Do you have any thoughts? You don't have to have specific players, but do you have any thoughts about where specifically you'd like to see us get some backups?
Yeah, I like the profile of player that Richard described. I think just adding on to that, it's more who can play sort of maybe on the shoulder of the defender and with pace. We don't really have that sort of profile other than the Langer. So if Langer's not playing for whatever reason, a lot of the players want the ball to feet, including Wood. So, even if we were to look at, say, an Evan Ferguson type, like he is more your kind of typical centre forward, whereby even if it's a more slight figure who's just express on the shoulder and stretches the game, and just keeps defenders honest, that's the sort of profile I'd like to see. And I love the fact that club didn't kind of just blindly concede and just spend the money in August. If the right player's not there in January, let's not rock the boat. Beyond that, I think what's really evident to me is if you have a strong pivot player, obviously Declan Rice is a prime player, but anyone who can really up level that sort of number 6 position. And Anderson has been doing that to a certain extent when he's deeper, but I mean, it just comes back to how good can Sangare be again. If that could work, then that would be an upgrade for sure. So those are the ones that are kind of front of mind for me. But say don't spend the money if it's not critical.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point about Sangare, like, funny enough, I actually thought he had a reasonably good first 3 games before he got injured, but he's been, he's not injury prone, but he's had an injury last year or sickness last year, which kept him out, and now he's done the same again this year. Not done the same, but it's happened to him again. So, I actually do hope for him as well that he comes back, because I do think he is a good player. I just think that we're yet to get him that run of games because of his fitness, which is really, really difficult for him. Danilo coming back will be huge. We don't know what he's going to be like. Obviously, it was a big injury for him as well. That'll be huge for us too in the midfield. The thing is, I honestly think Evan Ferguson, who you mentioned, Ross, that's my kind of player. Not just because he's Irish, but he's only just turned 20, and he's playing that sort of Harry Kane role where he can run, he can head, he's strong, he's quicker than he looks and appears, and he's only going to get better and smarter. And obviously you look at Chris Wood, as he's grown as a striker by the back end of his 20s and early 30s, he's shown his best. And I think if you invest in someone like Ferguson, you might get that by the age of 25, seriously, because he's been playing, high level since he was 17, 18 in the Premier League with Brighton. So yeah, Evan Ferguson will be one for me, especially on loan, because it looks like he might be available on loan in January. So that's kind of where I look. And I would hope that Morato, and who's done very well so far off the bench, and Omobamdeli, and our other backup defenders. Am I missing someone? Who's our other backup defender? There. Bolly, Bolly's been good, but obviously he's going to be probably moving on in the summer next year. But in terms of this season, he could be very useful, definitely, for sure. And I think he's already played a couple of games and done quite well. So yeah, good shout that. Before we move on to like a bit of Aston Villa and stuff like that, and I kind of just want to. I just want to enjoy Saturday a little bit more, and I know I've done it back to front, but like, everyone spoke about the game, everyone's talked about it, everyone's told us what's happened. We've all seen the goals, we've all seen Martinez flailing for the first goal and floundering for the third goal, back post, just letting it go in. We've seen Onana make mistakes. We've heard the theatre of dreams just quiet, deafened by wonderful Forest fans. But what a game to watch, eh, Richard? Like, what a like fun spectacle. Jota Silva just digging in, the referee giving them almost every free kick the first half that was possible. Sells making probably a game-changing save off the bar. If that goes in, they're 2-1 up. Their tails were up at that stage anyway. I think that they probably do go on to win the game. That second half 10 minutes, Nuno obviously put a rocket up everyone's arse and said, get out there and do something. And we did. We nearly scored 3 or 4 goals in that first 10, 15 minutes. And then, the decision for Amorim to take off Bruno to rest him, change the game. There was just so much going on in that game. And we weren't particularly great either, if I'm honest with you. We just willed ourselves to win and came up with really big moments. And I felt that 10 minutes in the second half was what won us the game. But Richard, talk a little bit about your feeling on who you thought was just the standout player. And I know you probably done this on your own podcast, but who was the standout player there on Saturday for you?
I think in the second half in particular, I thought Morgan really imposed his will a little bit more. He was a little bit more creative, a little bit more dynamic, the way that we know he can be. But Elliot Anderson continues to be just I mean, I don't know how many more times we can say he's an absolute steal given what we did. I mean, it's criminal. We should, I could see why people would be questioning what we're doing when they're accepting a player like Vlachodimos, and we're getting an Elliot Anderson. I mean, I know it wasn't necessarily a 1-for-1 trade, but just the way that unfolded. But he has the ability to be a Declan Rice type that I think Ross referenced, but he also has the ability to be, sort of a Madison or a Morgan Rogers type. I mean, in that number 10 role. I mean, that's just how comprehensively good he is. And the scary part is he's so young. This is his first time really getting considerable minutes in the Premier League. I mean, can you even fathom what he's going to look like next year? Under the system that Nuno's developed, increased coaching and match fitness and match awareness. And I mean, just that mental aspect of the game to get caught up to the pace of things and how you manage space and all of this stuff. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I'm excited. I love the notion of just him and Morgan just sort of pivoting between 8 and 10 and 8 and 10, maybe in a 6, drop, advancing roles, like Ross was talking about tactically. That's what you have with him.
Yeah.
And this thing is he hasn't even started scoring goals yet, but he can that ball into Milenkovic, the pace and the movement of it just gave it so much more force and direction, the way that he managed that free kick, or that corner. And so he's just got so many layers that haven't even been developed to their full potential yet. So for me, and plus he's the leading goal creating action player on our team right now. I mean, of anyone, which is, wow. I mean, I know Morgan's been injured, but so is he. So when you look at that as to where he is and the impact he's having now, I mean, by the end of the season, people are going to be coming at us. And it wouldn't shock me if certain teams come in. Manchester United could be one, with Fernandes getting older, coming after a guy like that and paying big.
Well, hang on, they're below us.
They're not afraid.
They're below us the table, so we don't need to worry.
But they're not afraid to throw money at things, right? Because that's what they do. But yeah,
but that was the old era under Ten Hag. No, you're good.
A bit of a long-winded answer, but
no, I love it. I'm only cutting you off because I'm like, no, hang on, we're above Man United right now.
I don't want that to happen. Trust me.
No, I know. But let's sit in the sunshine and imagine we're the better club right now.
Agreed. Don't give them any joy.
Yeah, don't give them anything. I think I woke up this morning and messaged the WhatsApp group. Did anyone see any football last night, lads? It was to my Man United mates and or the weekend lads, and they hated it. But Ross, sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off there, Richard. Ross, on that Anderson, look, I think Richard's bang on. I think he does better long-winded answers than I do because I just talk around in circles. So. Yeah, I think, Richard, you're bang on about Anderson, and some of the defensive stuff he did as well was just unbelievable, wasn't it, Ross? Like there was a couple of moments where a couple of players tried to get around him in really dangerous positions. He does this every game as well. He has this little sticks his leg out, almost like a Felipe from last year, and he wins the tackle. And I kind of look at it and go, wait a second, you're defensively brilliant as well. But yeah, he was unbelievable, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember that. I had a conversation with my brother about that in the ground, and I'm glad Richard went there because I was going to wax lyrical about Anderson, because there was about a 10-minute period and he won about 5 key duels on the defensive front in the second half. And to your point, Richard, like within the space of that 10 minutes, he played like a holding midfield player, a ball-winning midfield player, a engine room midfield player, a winger, a 10, like all in the space of about 10 minutes. And it's the same guy. And and I was sat there, obviously, with a Man United fan beside me, and I'm kind of looking at some of our players thinking who were the sorts that United of the past or in the future would be looking for. And, United need a Murillo, United need an Anderson. You look at their recruitment of, signing De Ligt or Maguire, it's like Milenkovic is up there in the same sort of, conversation. So, yeah, Anderson, I'm glad you went there because he was my guy, because in the ground, that second half, best player on the field by an absolute country mile.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the way you talked about him there and as well, it gets me thinking, geez, like, does he even know how good he's being? Does he even know? Is he just like default going, well, I'm switching to this kind of player now. I'm switching to, more defense. Like, is it just, I know that's football. I know athletes think differently, but sometimes you have to just step back and go, what is going on here? And another player who everyone's probably spoke about this season, but I was watching Arsenal beat Man United on Wednesday with a friend of mine having a few drinks, and he kept turning to me saying, Aina for you guys is really good. He's really good. This is an Arsenal fan saying that. he is effortlessly good all the time. That's like, I can't remember. I'm sure there is a bad game somewhere in there. Maybe it was the Fulham game that you were at, Ross. But he is effortlessly brilliant all the time. Like all the time. Like I wake up, I go put my shoes on, I eat dinner. I see that Aina's brilliant. It's like part of your day. Aina's going to be brilliant again today. He is every single game. You can guarantee he is going to be one of the best players on the pitch for either team. Do you agree, Richard?
100%. Yeah, sorry, I keep saying 100%, 100%.
No, I keep going.
7 out of 8.
Sorry,
yeah, 7 or 8 out of 10. No, you're good, man. 7 or 8 out of 10. A 7's the floor. I mean, it's just, I keep utilizing the phrasing silky smooth. Like he's deceptively agile and composed on the ball, and he can dribble around guys. He can, and then accelerate. I mean, as soon as he does, I mean, it's just, I've not seen I mean, maybe I'm just not recalling, but I just don't remember a profile player with that many attributes in that position. I mean, Kyle Walker probably is definitely one of those, right? But his ability to stand up players and keep them in front of him, and even if they attempt to try to get around him, he can match them stride for stride, and then he can continue to maintain defensive positioning. I mean, it's just, and his mind. I mean, he's a smart player too, and he just recognizes where his guys are at, and so and he makes quick decisions. I mean, it's just if it weren't for Yates and Morgan, I mean, you could easily hand the captain's armband to him or Milenkovic without even batting an eye, because that's the kind of players they are. They set the tone. They execute on the pitch. I mean, and he's just a great guy in the dressing room. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, it's just incredible. You're absolutely right. And so got him on a free.
I know.
I just, it continues to be shocking and mind blowing. It's just an absolute steal, the fact that he's still with us, and we're trying to re-sign him. I think there's contract negotiations going on right now. So if we can keep that guy for another 3 years, my goodness, can you imagine what he's going to be worth? And he's only 27. He's not even that old, and he's in his prime.
It's ridiculous. And I think, sorry, to your point about the captain stuff, not to go off on a tangent, but you just mentioned that the armband could go to him. It could go to Milenkovic. It could go to Murillo, it could go to Morgan Gibbs White, it could go to Sells every now and again. Like, it literally, when you have that many players on the pitch who can be your captain, you're dreaming, right? Like, we've spent 23 years between 1999 and 2022 in the absolute doldrums. Like, we deserve this now. It's almost, I genuinely, I know Leeds had their moment for 3 years and they finished 9th the first season. I feel like the Lords have just rained down on us and gone, look, you know what, guys? You had absolute nonsense for 23 years. Here you go. Here's your lot. You're just going to keep on rising. You're going to beat Liverpool at Anfield. You're going to beat Man United at Old Trafford. We still have to play those teams at home, and I think we can beat all of them. I think we can beat Man City at home. I think we can beat Arsenal at home. I think we can beat Liverpool at home. I think we can beat Man United again at home. Like, I know I'm being absolutely ridiculous. Am I, though? We've beaten some of them away. Do you know what I mean, Ross? I mean, I just, maybe the excitement of Old Trafford's taken me over, but we're in 5th and it's December, Ross. And I don't know. When we have that many players on the pitch, as Richard said, that could be captains, you just got to ask yourself, what is happening? And, it does come down to ownership. It does come down to taking risks and rolling the dice. I know we all saw that Evangelos Marinakis interview the other day. It was pretty cool. Just seeing a little bit of an inside. But yeah, I don't know where we go from here, but we do go to Villa this weekend. Segue. We do go to Villa. And should we be a little bit worried of them? They've had a bit of a revolution themselves over the last 5 years. And I know they're in Europe now, so they're a little bit distracted, but we should be wary this weekend, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just your point about leadership and accountability on the pitch, it's just incredible. I mean, that just means so much for us. But on Villa, I think, because they got a midweek league game, European game, that does put pressure on the system. I don't think they got the breadth of squad for all fronts. So I think we can go into it confident we can catch them. They're a weird team in the way that they kind of set up in terms of just the high line, and sometimes we have a good day against that. I think under Cooper we won 2-0 at City Ground, if I remember rightly, and then other times we kind of struggled a bit. But yeah, every game now we know that we're in it. I think my concern when you future cast the season, Chris, is less about the quote unquote big teams coming to town. For me, it's more about how many results are we getting against the mid-tier teams home and away? As evidenced by the Fulham game, which we're obviously all trying to forget, including me, for my last trip. But those are the types of sides that we struggle with the most. I feel like we can do okay against the Villas of the world. So we've got a system for everybody. I think we can go into every game confident. The structure's there. Obviously, the planning they do on the training ground is as good as the investment off the pitch. So it's just, every game, give it a go. Let's see where we go.
Yeah, it's talking about processes and systems. Obviously, we're seeing the templates laid out now with the late introduction of the other wingers. It's now Sousa and Alanga. It was Jota and Sousa. We're seeing the Morato back three introduction, which shut the game down, by the way, on Saturday. That shut the game down for 20 minutes. When he brought Morato on, it just said, no, sorry, that's the game done. And it seemed to do that every single game it's happened in. And I keep thinking, is this going to work this time? And it works every time. So the processes off the pitch on the training ground definitely are working. Richard, anyone you fear on Villa? I mean, Duran, Watkins, obviously, they've got some really talented players. Do you fear them at the moment, or are they a little bit leggy, as Ross said? Like, do they have that? They don't have the squad depth to be in Europe, surely, or do they?
I mean, they certainly got quality players, like Ross mentioned. I think this is a good time. I hate using that phrasing because we said the same thing about Man City, and that clearly didn't come to fruition. Completely different team, obviously, and talent level is just stratospheric with them. But I would say yes. I mean, they've conceded 5 more goals than we have at this point. I think we can match them. I think defensively we're better than them, even though I think Konsa's a brilliant footballer. I still think we offer something, especially when you bring Murata on. I think we're a problem on a set piece side of things too, both in terms of how we defend them and how we utilize them from an offensive standpoint. It's weird. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, and I hope I'm not going to be proven wrong. And this is sort of like, it's like a no-hitter. You don't talk about it, right? When it's going on, but I feel like we can get at them. I saw Southampton. I watched that entire match. And I understand Ollie Watkins wasn't on the pitch, and I know Digne wasn't on the pitch, and there was some guys that normally are starters for them, but Morgan Rogers was there, Duran, as you mentioned, who scored the goal, but they did not look scary to me whatsoever. Their composure in the middle of the pitch was not great. They were giving away balls left and right. I mean, even Morgan Rogers had some, terrible balls that, Southampton easily plugged the lanes and got to and then countered them. So that, with knowing that we have better players and a better, I think, setup and managerial and structure than what Southampton has, clearly we're far more of a threat, just evidenced by what we're doing so far this season compared to what they're doing. I think we can beat them, and probably, if it's anywhere close to the kind of performance they gave against Southampton, if they take us lightly whatsoever, I mean, it could be a 3-0 win, 3-1 win. I think very easily a Fulham-type performance like we had against Fulham last home game. I fully expect that to be the case, to be candid.
Wow.
Maybe I'm over-optimistic after the Manchester United win, like you. But I still think it can happen.
Just bask in this for a little bit. We've had 25 years of hell, and now we're back. So, I agree. I think I have this sort of illogical, sort of irrational logic, not illogical. Well, it's probably both. I always talk about teams over the course of the last 2 years that came to the City Ground and never really performed. And Crystal Palace are one of those teams that we seem to keep beating at the City Ground, or keep getting the better of at the City Ground. West Ham were one of those teams, and I think Villa are that too. We were really all over the place when we drew with them 1-1 that first season. Last year we beat them 2-0 under Cooper. Obviously, lots has changed since both those sides come in. I say it every podcast. People are like, why does that make a difference? I don't know. I just think some of those squad members are still there. They come into the City Ground, and there's that little wobble. Martinez had a wobble with the ball last year for Mangala's goal. I feel like they're I feel like Villa will come there and be a little bit intimidated. I do. Most teams are intimidating on the City Ground, but I feel like they will. And I think it's a big chance to get another big 3 points before we go away to Brentford after that. But yeah, look, I'll wrap this up with a red hot take if you have any, and then we'll say goodbye and do plugs and stuff. Ross, do you have a red hot take? I don't know if I gave you time enough to get one in. Just till 2024, last 3 games, a bit of a red hot take.
Yeah, well, I think last time I was with Matt, I did mention that I thought that Elliot Anderson was going to make the England squad in the World Cup 2026. That was my red hot take because I think he's got that versatility to be a good tournament player. So I think this week's red hot take is Callum is going to absolutely tear Matt Cash apart down the left.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So an ex-Forest player apart on that side. That's brilliant. Yeah, because he's going to be marking him. I love that. Do you think maybe Cashy gets an early yellow and then he's stuck on it? Do you know what I mean? Something like that.
Could go that way. Yeah.
Lovely. Richard, what about you?
All right. So my red hot take is Elliot Anderson gets his first goal. Murillo gets his first goal from outside the box. And then Jota gets the third goal. So all of these sort of unexpected members of our team are all going to score and put us at that 3-1 score line that I mentioned. So I've been waiting for Murillo to just tag one from outside the box and slot it right in the corner. And I could just, and it would make me so happy to see Martinez be so pissed at himself for that. And it would just be glorious to watch him melt down after that happens. So that's my red hot take. I don't know how red hot that is, but what's that?
All three would be Callum Hudson-Odoi assists. That's what you're trying to say, right?
There you go. I like that.
There the double up with the red hot take.
Yeah.
My weird red hot takes are always like I like seeing an opposition player get sent off because I like seeing the opposition just get demoralized and it gives us that extra chance, like West Ham. So I'm going to go with Martinez is going to give away a penalty and get sent off, and Wood is going to smash down the middle again, and we're going to win 2-1. We'll be 2-0 up and they'll come back into it. But anyway, look, thanks both for joining me last minute. Matt is, I didn't even mention where Matt is, but Matt is, he went AWOL for the weekend. I don't know where he was. I messaged him on Sunday. He's fine. He just didn't message the group. And I was like, what's going on? We just beat Man United at Old Trafford. And he hadn't messaged anyone. It was an amazing weekend. My wife forgot her passport to the airport on the way to Paris on Friday. And we had to drive back, forget our flight, buy a new flight. And I took a tenner and went to the bookies and said, look, we'll make a bet. And if we win this bet, it's over 2.5 goals for these 4 or 6 games. If we do it, we get the money back for the flight. And we won. And one of the games was Forest, which had more than 2.5 goals in the game. So it was a really lucky, special weekend in general. Thank you so much for coming on. Oh, it's just so good to beat Man United at Old Trafford. It's so, so good. They're in 13th, we're in 5th. It's just, I can't get over it. Ross, any plugs or goodbyes or shout outs to anyone?
Yeah, a couple of quick ones. So I want to shout out to Mark Rogers and his son Henry, who I rode up from Swindon with to the Ipswich game. It was great to reminisce over trips that we'd done in the past. And there's a lot of fans I know who travel across England to get to the city ground to follow Forest. And what was really great was seeing Taku-san there from Japan. And just, I don't know, you've probably seen this, Richard, but his response to Mola Kintai has kind of gone a bit viral within the US system through Men in Blazers and a few other things. So it's just really, really wholesome to see the love and affection globally of Forest fans. The profile is obviously extending, but just because we live far away doesn't mean that we care less. And, so just a big shout out to everyone who's far away from the ground, but like the club is close to their heart.
That is a world-class shout out right there, Ross. You speak way better than I do. By the way, Ross and I, Richard, were at the Ipswich game, and Ross, I could see Ross in the distance. It was this tall, very handsome man. I went, oh my gosh, is he that good looking? What's going on? And he came over, and I waved at him, and he came over, and Taku and Co were sat there. They were on the podcast a few weeks ago, but they were sat there with myself, Matt Davies' daughter, and Greg came over, and Statsman Will's on the podcast. It was just a really good collection of people. Elliot and other people came over, and the nav was really nice. It was just a really nice moment because I'd seen Ross on the podcast a couple of times, and he went to the Fulham game, and unfortunately Forest lost 1-0, and then this was just the reverse. And then I saw Ross at the end of the game in silhouette underneath that Forest sign outside the stadium. And I kind of went over to him and was like, well, you got your win. And you skipped Man City, Ross, and went to the United game. So you're now the good luck charm, which is great. But yeah, sorry for tagging on the end of your shout outs. I just thought that was just such a wonderful moment. You're right. It is Forest all over the world. And that was amazing. Richard, what about yourself? Give a shout out to your podcast and your host, Greg, and everything else. And, go for it.
Yeah, so we got another one with coming up tomorrow with a gentleman who's actually a fan in Australia. So speaking of Forest all over, another guy from expat who's down in Australia. He's coming on. His name's Scotty. So looking forward to talking with him. We had Chief on just recently, who was fantastic as always. Yeah, that's our podcast. We got a few episodes a week. Well, One With One's an ode to friends, calling their episodes the One With. But I also want to give a shout out to the big man, Evangelos Marinakis, and to our gaffer, Nuno, for the wonderful work they do with the Warriors, the special needs kids who are just amazing. They're just so incredible. And like Ross said, it's just so wonderful to see our club be involved and genuinely enjoying those moments and being able to spend that time with them and seeing how excited they are. And it's just great to know you've got this club who's just so ingrained in the community and loves the people in the community. And I think Marinakis, for all the things that people say about him, sort of Tweetgate and all that, I think he genuinely cares about what we're doing, not only in terms of the on-field performance, but how he impacts the community at large. So it's good to see. So it is a real wonderful moment.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is true. And by the way, you've just reminded me the couple of shout outs. The guy who does the Oh Mist Rolling In fanzine magazine. I think it's Juan. He's a legend as well. Big shout out to him. I met him at the Ipswich game. And Andrew Cove, who I nearly met, he was at the Ipswich game, but I couldn't quite catch him. Big shout out to him. I think he was there with his dad. So just massive shout out to the two of them. And yeah, look, that's it. Massive shout out to Matt, my co-host, who's not here, who's let us all down again, as usual. But look, he'll be back. He's just quite busy this time of year, so we'll have him back on intermittently, and we'll have wonderful guests like you to fill in and do a way better job than he or I ever could. Thank you, everyone. We beat Man United at Old Trafford. When you are feeling blue, wake up in the morning and watch those highlights again. It's a joy to see the Theatre of Dreams smashed into the Theatre of Nightmares.